Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the August 27th meeting of the Rotary Club of Marietta Metro. Please stand and I will call on Tom Wall to lead us in our invocation and pledge allegiance.
Gracious Lord, you've truly blessed us. You've given us the opportunity to gather here with friends and fellow Rotarians. And we pray that the work that we try to do to support those that are less fortunate will be able to continue and grow. We pray that you'll be with our leaders in this world where the entire world seems so dysfunctional. We thank you for the food that you've given us to sustain our bodies. We thank you for those that prepared it. We pray that you will bless them. This we pray in Christ's name.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bob. Charles Kaiser. If you are ready, please come up and introduce our guests, visiting Rotarians, and conduct our further scholarship grant.
Okay, we have a number of guests today. First of all, let me recognize Randy Carmichael. We're here to raise his hand here today. We also have as guest today, this is another, former Rotarian, becoming one of our Rotarians, as I recall. Leon Benfield, where are you, Leon? Right here in the orange shirt, Auburn shirt. Richard Huffman, where are you, Richard? Good to see you again. He's over there behind the stick. And then Chandler Breland, guest of Jeff Beamer, over here. Good to see you, Chandler. Okay, we have a good raffle participation today. This is another nonprofit that I'm associated with for about 3 decades now. The State YMCA of Georgia is the beneficiary of the tickets, of the table sales. But I was raffling off 2 tickets, dinner for 2. So each ticket winner is going to receive dinner for 2, Low Country Boil, be held in Governor Roy Barnes' backyard around his pool. It'll include complimentary beverages. There's a self-guided tour of his entire house. If you think his front yard is decorated over the top for every occasion, wait till you see each of the rooms inside if you're the winner. So I'll ask our guest to, not our speaker, not our guest, to draw the 2 winning tickets. First ticket. Just disappeared into the podium. Sorry, I'm going to have to draw 3rd ticket. Okay, I didn't see the number. This is still random. Okay, 6016, and the last 3 digits are 077. 077. Listening. Okay, we haven't winner yet? 077. Oh, Richard, come on up then. And then the second winner is last 3 digits, 102. 102. Ah, another visitor. All right, you got that to look at. Okay, this is the information that both you gentlemen will need. If you would come up to the front for a second, please. I'll come down and I'll be.
Charles, congratulations on the winner. And thanks for visiting our club today. Club business and announcements. Do not forget about your Rotary International Foundation pledges that were emailed to you just this past week or so. Whatever you filled out on your form or your pledge from last year should be what your invoice states. Please send that as soon as possible, hopefully within the next month or so. We can get that taken care of. Thank you, Randy, for handling all that. Thank you for everyone who contributed the pasta sauce and milk and or money for the KSU student pantry. Amy Erskine received an email from Marcy over the weekend saying that they had an urgent request for the pasta sauce and milk. So after this meeting today, I will run that up to the KSU student pantry and then hopefully they can do that tonight. I appreciate everyone's help there. There were also a couple of other items happening behind the scenes this week. Charles had a meeting with the KSU Rotaract. He met with the president, the advisor, the several Rotary clubs that are participating in sponsorships with the Rotaract this year. So hopefully we will see more of them at our meetings and we will be able to interact with them as well. That is one of the things that is coming from our Rotary International president, Barry Rassin, who says, you know, the members are coming up through the ranks, so we want to get the Rotaractors involved with Rotary and keep them coming up. So we are on our way to doing that. Tim Bailey had a meeting with the Laws of Life people in Atlanta for a kickoff for the Laws of Life program, so we will be hearing more of that as well. And I went to a dedication over the weekend over at the Must Ministries campus on 41 by the Elizabeth Inn. So as part of our district grant, we applied for some money to help them with their technology department. So what this actually was, it started with one of their high schoolers who volunteers at Must Ministries. She goes to the Whitfield Academy. And she was touring the campus and wanted to do something for the children that stay at the Elizabeth Inn. Now, they're only there for about 30 days. It's a stopover point until they can get established and move on. But she realized that there was nowhere for children to have some space for themselves or have any access to technology. So they had an unused trailer that she found in the back of the parking lot. And this trailer has been transformed by the help of a grant from the Whitfield Academy. There was a building company that came in and made modifications, new windows, new carpeting, and we supplied money for them to purchase some tablets and a locking cart that is now all in this trailer. And it's a great little escape for the children to use while they are there. Hopefully, I want to get some pictures. I didn't get many pictures or many good ones when I was there. But hopefully we will see some pictures of that at some point in the future and potentially tour the facility later in the year. That's my plan anyway. Sally, are you ready for your family of Rotary?
I am, thank you. A couple of items today. Some good news and some less than good news. There's some good news. The less than good news is that Beverly Collins has had to resign from the club. She is fine, half fine, but they have 6 additional people living in their home right now, including 3 grandchildren. So they are up to their ears in little alligators or little people, and she's kind of feeling overwhelmed. I've told her that as soon as she's ready to come back, we'll welcome her with open arms. We perfectly understand why she has to step away right now. The good news has to do with Rosemary Martin's son, Brad, who had his stem cell transplant about 10 days ago. He's doing very well. coming through it with flying colors, much better actually than they had anticipated. So thank you for your prayers. Thanks to those of you who donated blood so that we could have the plasma that we needed, which ended up being about 60 units of plasma that we needed. And continue to pray for his healing to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. Club Sunshine this week, we have another birthday today. Unfortunately, Chad is not here today. It's Chad's birthday today. And there are several anniversaries coming up this week. First being Mark and Barbara Cornfield on Saturday, September 1st. Casey and Lisa Kadow on Sunday, next Sunday the 2nd. And Bill and Fern White. Bill is not here, unfortunately. Any other Club Sunshine this week? Anybody?
Are you asking for sunshine?
Club Sunshine, yes. John?
Well, I did one, last month, Harold and I, well, you know, we lived in Europe for about 4.5 years. And, but back during the old Cold War, you couldn't cross over into a lot of places. But we just, last month, went to Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovenia, and all those Balkan countries, to Croatia, and it was just a delightful trip to kind of see what used to be the enemy, so to speak, here in the old Cold War. And I would say anybody that wants to try that trip, it is absolutely worth it. And they've come a long way since that time trip.
Welcome back. And anybody else, any other sunshine? All right, very quickly. Tim Bale, if you would please introduce our guest speaker.
Hello, it is my pleasure to introduce Buck Buchanan today. Y'all all know him from the many months he's been here with us at the club. Buck was born in Chattanooga, born and raised in Chattanooga. He's lived in California, Douglasville, Wilburn, Marietta, probably some other places too. But he will tell you all about that. Here is Buck Buchanan.
You know, I'm going to walk over here because I like to walk around and talk. And so some of you didn't know that I wrote a book. Some of you didn't even know that I could read. I understand that, but I'll try to convince you otherwise. But yes, I wrote a book, and actually some of you in this room have read my book. So a lot of people say, well, why did you write a book? Well, the first thing would be is, if you were one of my English teachers and you were lining all the people up of who was going to write the book and who was least likely to write the book, I would be on the least likely book writing page. So how did you get into writing a book? Because I'm a business guy. That's what I did all my life. Well, it started at our last reunion, high school reunion 40 years ago. We're all sitting around as you do at class reunion, talking about all the stuff that you did, all the crazy things you did, and everybody's going on, and somebody says, somebody ought to write a book about this. So there were several cocktails involved in that discussion, and so one thing led to another, and I said, I raised my hand, I said, I'll do it. Of course, the good thing was the next day everybody forgot that said I would write a book. Well, a couple of years later, I was given a presentation to a group of salespeople, and it was about sales and sales marketing. I gave this presentation, and after I got through, I sat down at the table. This lady comes up and sits next to me. She was a media consultant. She says, you know, you can make a living doing this. I said, doing what? She says, well, you can speak. You get up and talk in front of people. You catch your attention. You ought to do something, but you got to write a book. I said, what do I need to write a book for? Says, well, you write a book that gives you credibility, so you should write a book about sales and sales management and that sort of stuff. So we talked for a little while about this because this was something I never thought about writing a book. So anyway, I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to write a book, but it's not going to be about business. It's going to be about high school football. So that's what I did. Well, this was several months later. I actually started writing a book. I started writing a book in April of 14, and I didn't know anything about writing a book. I talked to one guy, he says, well, if you're going to write a book, what you need to do is do something every day. Whether it's 1 paragraph, 4 pages, 6 chapters, do something so you're engaged in writing a book. I said, well, that makes sense. So I started doing my research. I was living in California at the time. I was traveling all over the world. I was traveling to Asia and South America, back and forth from Atlanta to California to New York and so forth. But every time I'd come back this way, I'd go to Chattanooga. That's where I'm from. That's where this takes place. And I would go to the library and I would do research of the time frame of where my book was going to be. Sometimes when I'd be up there, I'd be meeting with former teammates or classmates, and we'd talk about, what do you remember from high school? There's a lot of different versions about what happens in high school. We all got a whole lot better in football than we were 20, 40 years ago. So anyway, I took these notes down and I would write the book. Well, I finished the manuscript in December of 2014. So now I've got a manuscript. Now what do you do? Okay. Good thing is I had a friend. She is a published author on a New York publishing house. She told me what to do. She said, you call this guy, he's your editor, see if he'll do it. I sent him my manuscript. So what do you think? He says, okay, I'll do it. So anyway, he set me on the page to edit my book. I self-published the book, I self-promoted the book, but he gave me all the steps along the way. So you can write a book if you want to. You just got to decide you want to or not. And if you do, you got to stick with it. Now the book that I'm going to tell you about, and by the way, I have copies. But the book I'm going to talk to you about is about when I was a kid in high school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Between the summer of '69 and November of 1970. So let me kind of give you an idea of what was going on. Chattanooga, most of you have been through it many times. It was like any southern place, a lot of activity, stuff for kids to do right on the river. But really, we also had tools that a lot of people don't do. We had mobile phones. They were called phone booths. You had to call a landline. We had Google search. It was called a library. We had a laptop. It was called a calculator and a slide rule. And we had GPS. It was just in the form of a paper map. And yes, the film that we used in our camera was also one thing. So we had modern technology in those days. We also had social media. We got to hear the news at least once a day at 6 o'clock as the local news. At 6:30 was the national news. And in between, we could listen to the radio or read the paper. So we had social media. But the summer in '69, a lot of things were going on. Some of you may remember it. Some of you read books about it. Some of your mom and dad told you about it. But Nixon was sworn in. So the Nixon era came in January of '69. The Vietnam War was heating up. It was continuing on. As it would go on, it was on the news every night. And there was social unrest. There were kind of two sides to the story. There were those that felt like we shouldn't be in the war, and there were those that felt like we should support the troops. As a result, there was riots all over the country. It was a daily thing that you had to experience. So there was a lot of tension, a lot of change in the atmosphere. And this was the kind of stuff that a kid in high school has to go through. Although you don't think about it a lot, it was around. In the summer of '69, in July and August, there were 4 events that took place that we still affect us somewhat today. Anybody want to guess what one of those is?
Woodstock.
Woodstock? Oh, there's Woodstock. What?
Moon landing.
Moon landing. Anything else? Those are 2 good ones. Those 2 made the list.
Bobby Kennedy.
Ah, Bobby County.
Bobby Kennedy.
There you're close. Okay, so let's go through it. So Chappaquiddick. So most likely that would have affected our future, one of the future presidents that we would have had if that had not happened. Landed on the moon in July of that year. Then we get into the Manson murders. Just recently you heard about Charles Manson had died. We've been hearing about that ever since. And Woodstock gave us the terminology of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that was really kind of the transitioning point between 69 and into the 70s. So a lot of things were happening in the world at that time. And again, imagine, and some of you did, you went through that as kids in high school. How do you deal with that? Well, in my particular case, I had gone to a military school for 3 years. And I finally convinced my dad that I'd learned all the military I need to know, and so it was time for me to go to a public school. So I went to a public school. So I enrolled in a Chattanooga High School, which they refer to as City High School. It was one of the oldest high schools in the South. It was founded in 1874. So I had been out of town for 3 years. This school had 1,500 kids in it, and I was basically a new kid coming in at my junior year of high school. So what am I going to do? Who am I going to, I don't know anybody there. Well, I played football at the military school on the varsity. I was a hot shot. I was going to go and I would just get on the football team and I'd be able to do that. That'd be my way in, would be on the football team. I'd already registered to school. The football coach says, come to practice on certain day. All I had to do was show up. So I showed up. I feel these guys' pain. This is something happened here in Marietta. Guess what? Happened to me too, long time ago. I go to report to practice for the first day. The coach tells me, son, you can come play with us, but you're ineligible to play your junior year because you transferred schools and you didn't move your residence. So, he said I could play on the JV team in practice. I said, Coach, if I can't play on the varsity, I'm not going to play. So I left. Anyway, segregation was a big part of what we all dealt with. You'll remember what that was. It was in the South, there was a lot of the schools still segregated. The federal government and the Nixon administration was doing all they can to force it into the desegregation, to break all that down. But there was resistance. Lester Maddox was governor of the state of Georgia, and he actually urged students to boycott schools. And where I came from, we would have riots within the schools. Brainerd High School was one of the schools that we had in our area, and they had constant fights to the point where schools were suspended and citywide curfews were put in place. There was a lot of unrest that we had to deal with. The schools that I went to, we played our arch rival, Chattanooga Central. The Purple Pounders, they're the ones that we're competing with. The only sad thing is we hadn't beat them in 30 years. So I went to the games. I'm sitting up in the stands, and guess what happened? They beat us again. So I determined, I said, you know what, I'm not going to let that happen next year. I'm going to be committed. And I went to see the coach. I said, Coach, I'll go play on the JV team. I'll go ahead and practice. I don't want that to happen again. So he let me do it. He said, go see if you can find a uniform and be in practice Monday afternoon. So I went back. So I continued practicing and continued meeting people, and so then we get into 1970. 1970 was a new decade, but many carryovers from the late 60s. The racial issues were still a big deal we were dealing with. So a couple of friends of mine, we decided after school we were going to a basketball game. So we were going to go see Chattanooga Riverside play. Chattanooga Riverside had won 66 games straight. They won 2 straight state championships, and we were playing at their gym. The 3 guys I went with and the other 17 white people were the only ones in the stands that were white. The rest of them were black. Well, it wasn't a big deal. They were undefeated. Our team was probably a little bit over 500. We were a decent team. So the game starts. It was kind of competitive for the first half. Riverside was ahead a little bit at the halftime. Second half, our team takes the lead. We get up 7 or 8 points. Get into the fourth quarter. 2 minutes to go in the game, the lead narrows. It's tied up. Our point guard gets fouled. Goes to the line. Shoots a 1-and-1. Shoots an air ball. Goes into overtime. We win the game. The police come and escort us all to the locker room. Us in the stands and the kids on the field to the locker room. We stay there for 45 minutes and are escorted one by one by the police to our cars. So this is the kind of stuff you were dealing with. Springtime rolls around. Springtime is here. We have dances. There's slumber parties that go on. And you do the normal kind of stuff. And by the way, there was some studying that went on during all this. But there was spring football. Spring football was my time that I was going to get on the field and show these guys what I could really do. It was my time to make the varsity football team. Well, if the picture is the first date with my wife, Cindy, and me. And we were juniors in high school. We've been married over 40 years now. Well, you'll see on my left hand was a cast. The first practice of spring football, I break my eye. So I can't play spring football. That's okay. I was a pretty cool guy because that night after that dance, my wife and I, who was not my wife then, we go out. We're sitting out on a swing at this friend of ours' house. I'm going to make this really cool move. I'm going to put my arm around her. I hit her in the head with that cast. She still married me. So, anyway, you know, summertime gets here and we forget for a while about all the tensions that are going on in the schools, and so we do all the fun kind of stuff you do. Well, drive-ins. Many of you remember drive-ins. That were something you went to and you took your date, or you went to with a group and you had fun. Well, this little young lady, her name's Sammy, and my wife Cindy decided that after they were at a slumber party, and we'll sneak through to get into the drive-in. Well, the only car they had available was this 1966 Mustang. Do you think you could get two girls in the trunk of a 1966 Mustang? Well, you could. So they were going to try this before they did it. So they tried it out in front of the house where they were having a slumber party. They got into the car, into the trunk. They shut the lid on the trunk. The only problem is the keys were in Sammy's pocket, in the trunk. So here you have two little girls in the back of a trunk with the keys in their pocket. Fortunately, about an hour and a half later, a couple of football guys came by, were able to pry open the corner of it, and she was able to maneuver the key down to the hole that had been created with her toe, and they got out. So those are the kind of things that you did. You know, we did other stuff. We all had jobs of some version or another. I was a sack boy at a grocery store. You went to the lake, you played ball, and then you had dates. So we did all that kind of stuff too. But there was some other stuff that was pretty hard to deal with. Now this is a house that was on Signal Mountain. Signal Mountain there's two mountains in Chattanooga, one's Lookout, one's Signal. And Signal Mountain, there's a road that goes from Chattanooga over Signal Mountain into Sequatchie Valley. Now Sequatchie Valley is the place where you would go to get to see your bootlegger or your moonshiner, or to get parts for your car that had been stolen the night before. That was the kind of place it was. Well, it was also a place where you drove right through these areas where these houses were. And these kids in our school would play basketball at some of this friend of ours' house. He had a couple of black kids up there playing one afternoon. It was done all the time. Wasn't a big deal. Our school had a great racial relationships with each other. Well, the next morning after they'd been playing, a couple of black kids and the rest of the white kids, the Gaylord family woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was a bright light. There was a cross burning in these guys' front yards on Taft Highway. The fire department came and extinguished it. The police came. They said, well, probably what it was is some of the guys that work in Chattanooga that live in Sequatchie Valley came up there and they noticed it and they said, we're going to make a point to put that cross there. Again, this is the kind of stuff we were dealing with. This is real life stuff. The good thing is that we didn't see any more of that for a long time. And we got into football. It was football season. We got into the things, the two-a-days. The two-a-days where they don't give you water or anything until you're through practicing. You take the salt tablets, you run up the hills. And we had 4 coaches. How many coaches does Marietta have today? Probably 15. We had 4. One of them was our head coach. And he was also our offensive coordinator. Coach Bobby Davis was the guy that we all looked up to. And he was a guy that he really had 3 maxims that he lived with. One is play as a team. His point was I don't care what side of the tracks you're from. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what religious you are. When you are on this football field, you are one. And you play together as one. And that's something that he put in our heads that many of us remember till today. He also told us that whatever you do it until you get it right. We ran about 9 or 10 plays. That was it. But you better believe we ran them right. And he also says if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't help. What he meant by that is you got to work at it if you want to be good at anything. He was a simple guy, but those are the kind of things that he brought to us. I'm sure many of your coaches that you guys played with, you probably heard some similar things. So the first game of the year, we're going to go. We were favored to be one of the top teams in Chattanooga. We go play East Ridge. We're ahead 7-6 at halftime. We go to the end zone because it was a hot night. Coach didn't want us to go in the locker room. We're sitting over there kind of talking around and drinking, and we look over. Coach Bob Davis is laying on the field. We see him put into an ambulance and taken to the hospital. He has a heart attack. So the guy that leads us is on his way to the hospital. We end up getting beat 12-7, and part of the problem is we had the ball 4 times inside the 20-yard line and couldn't score because nobody knew what play to call. The next week, we go to Red Bank. We all made a pledge. We're going to win this game and give the game ball to Coach Davis in the hospital. We got beat 19-18. We had a lot of home cooking going on. There was that happened. I know David Hunter never had that happen to him at Marietta, but anyway, we had that, so we lost that game. The next week, we travel 180 miles west to Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. The one thing about Lawrenceburg that anybody could say is worthwhile is that Davy Crockett lived there at some point in time. We ended up tying that game 14-14. So we head back to Chattanooga. The team was supposed to win the whole city, and we were 0-2-1. Now we play Riverside. Riverside's a team that we've beaten in basketball, undefeated. They were undefeated in football. They were 3-0. We ended up winning the game. So we were back on a winning track. And from that point, we go on and we keep the winning streak going. We have homecoming, and our coach comes back at game 7. During the homecoming, we have a tradition, similar to what Marietta has. Marietta, for some reason, likes to roll their parking lot at the beginning of the year. Well, homecoming in our tradition is the cheerleaders roll all the senior football players' yards. So Saturday morning after our homecoming game, I got to clean up toilet paper in my front yard. So anyway, then our 9th game, we still hadn't lost since that we got the streak going. We're playing Chattanooga Howard. Chattanooga Howard's an all-black school. We play them, and now if you go to Chattanooga, the place where the Lookouts play, that used to be a football field that overlooked the Tennessee River, and that's where we played. It was a cool night. We played them. They take the lead 6-0. It was one of the hardest fought games I've ever played in. Brutal game, dirty game, name-calling game. It was tough. Our black kids that were on our team got their brains beat down. It was a tough game. We ended up in the 4th quarter, we're still down. We drive down the field. With about 5 minutes to go, we score. We tied up 6-6. I'm over on the right side blocking as our extra point guy gets ready to kick it. Now, he's 50-50 at best. So he kicks the ball. The ball goes up, and it looks like to me it goes to the right of the upright. The ref goes, it's good. 7-6. We hold on, win the game 7-6. We get in the bus to go back to school. The bus is on the hill, and it goes behind the stands where the Howard people were. Well, they began to rock the bus. We thought the bus was going to be flipped over until the police came, and they had to give us an escort out of the parking lot and back to school. This is the kind of stuff you had to deal with. Anyway, the next week was an off week, but we had to get ready. We were going to, last game of the season, we're going to play Chattanooga Central, the team that we hadn't beat in 30 years. So it was a big deal. It was on the radio. There were over 10,000 people at the game. It was packed house because they anticipated that Chattanooga City High was going to beat Chattanooga Central for the first time in 30 years. So the game, the first quarter starts, goes back and forth. They're going to punt the football. Guess who's back to receive the punt? I'm back to receive the punt. The ball's coming straight at me. I look up. I see there's a hole on the left side, and all I can see is the goal line. I can see that, gee whiz, my name's going to be the headline of the sports page. Buchanan runs it back and scores a winning touchdown. Sure enough, here comes the ball. It gets close to me. It goes right through my arms. I hadn't fumbled a punt all year. I reach down to get the ball. I kick it 10 yards to our own goal line. Central recovers and scores. 6-0. As I go back to the bench, I have several teammates give me death threats on the way back. The good news is that we did end up getting into halftime 7-6. The bad news is the coach, who'd had a heart attack, was sitting there addressing my performance as he drank his heart medicine out of the bottle. So anyway, we go back, and the good news is we came back and won the game. First time in over 30 years, we finally beat Chattanooga Central. We beat them 28-6. The irony of it was I had had a great year. I've been nominated All-City, and then I fumbled the one punt. That's really the only mistake I made all year, but that's what a lot of people remember me from. Although I've made people forget about that since then. But anyway, so that's kind of I've given you kind of the overview of what the book is about. It'll take you back into your memories of what you thought of it in high school. Some people loved high school, some people didn't like high school, but you all remember something about high school. And I have actually sold about 500 of these books. They've been sold all over the country and from California to New York. And a lot of people have enjoyed them. So I actually brought a few books just in case some of you guys wanted to have some. They're $15 a piece. And of every book that I sell, $3 is going to go to the club. So if you like it, we'll do that. And just to let you know, I kept my promise to the lady, the social media person, that I did write this other book, the business book, and it will be coming out at the end of the year. It's called The Game of Sales. So then I'll go on to speaking tour and talk about how to sell things. Thanks for your attention. If you want some books, I'll be over here and be glad to. Oh, questions?
What is 1st and 30? When were you 1st and 30?
When we were 1st and 30? We won, first time we won the game against Central in 30 years. Yes, Mr. Hunter?
I thought it was first down
Let me
and
say
30
this is a very example, and not only that, he had one of his best friends lived on a lake by himself. And his parents weren't even living there. So they got to spend time on the lake, and they had a big time.
Yes, now, just to let you know this, I wrote the book as PG-13 because I knew that I had grandkids that one day would say, "Did you really do that, Mom?" Or Grandpa and Mom, Grandma? So it's a PG-13 book. There is drinking involved in it, just had to tell you. That's probably the most risque thing is there's quite a bit of alcohol consumption. Anyway, any other questions? Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you, Bud. Thank you for being a fill-in guest speaker for us. We do appreciate it. I think that was great, very entertaining. Unfortunately, I don't remember a lot of those things that you talked about at the beginning, but I'm sure some people in the room might remember some of it. End of meeting announcements. I still have ball drop tickets for the Sweetwater Mission South Cobb Rotary Ball Drop to be held in October, if anybody is interested in supporting that. This Wednesday, 2 days from now, we have our August social at Two Birds Tap House on the square, 5:30, for some light appetizers and a couple of drinks.
Sign-ups are on the table.
sign-ups are on the table, just to give us an idea of who might be joining us. Thank you, Adam, for setting that up. No meeting next week. We'll have a week off. It will be Labor Day next Monday, so do not show up for lunch. But we will meet the following Monday, September 10th, when our speaker will be Kathy Rakestraw, and she is with the Greyhound Rescue something. Greyhound Rescue. Thank you for all of our visitors joining us today. Leon and Richard, good to see you again. Randy, thanks for coming by. And Chandler, thanks for visiting again. With that being said, I'll ask Bob Wall to lead us in the four-way test, and we will be adjourned.
Four-way test. Let's say and do. First,
Is it true?
second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
fourth.
Will it be beneficial